Today's topic is going to be something that everybody can relate to. So what I would really like to do is make this more of an interactive experience. Michelle mentioned in the control panel that you can submit questions. We'd love for you to submit questions about today's topic. Now, I think that the topic is relevant to everyone, and the reason I say that is because we have the highest attendee rate ever today, which is very telling. Originally, Michelle and I were talking, and we were like, you know, it's July, people are on vacation, people are really busy during the summertime. And so we were actually thinking of not holding a July webinar and kind of taking a summer break, but I'm glad we did, and I'm glad that it's a topic that everyone's interested in. And so I'm sure that there's going to be some things today that you can apply back in the workplace right away. There's also going to be some things that you're going to hear today and you can say, well, you know, in my particular job, that's not going to work for me, and that's fine. So I will be thrilled if you can take away at least 2 or 3 tidbits today that you can apply back in the workplace on your job to make your job easier. So today's topic is, whoop, hold on, technical problem. One sec. There we go. Time management and the overwhelmed employee. So as I said, judging by the number of people that we have joining today, I think this is a topic that you all can relate to, or something with this topic is resonating with you for sure. So in the next 50 minutes or so, we're going to talk about what the overwhelmed employee is, and then we're going to talk about some tips that you can apply to the workplace to help decrease the sense of overwhelm that you may feel. And they're going to be largely time management related tips. So let's first take a look at this individual with whom I am referring to as the overwhelmed employee. And actually, I didn't coin that phrase. You might have seen it. It's been in the headlines in the past several years, let's say. And I think that it actually came from Deloitte. They do a workforce trends survey annually, and they put out a really great report. And they first started talking about the overwhelmed employee as an organizational development issue within organizations about 3 years ago, in 2014, I believe. So, so the overwhelmed employee, I'm going to credit Deloitte with that phrase because that's not something that we came up with here. But let's take a look at who the overwhelmed employee is. So, meet the overwhelmed employee. I hope you're chuckling on that end, and I hope that you can relate to that. And I know I can say humbly that I can easily insert my picture in there, and I would feel right at home. So, like I said, you're probably feeling a little bit of overwhelm, or you might not have joined us today. And if you're not feeling overwhelmed, that's great, but you have some tips you can share with others in your workplace. So in order to understand if you do fit the definition of an overwhelmed employee, let's take a look at some of the symptoms that an overwhelmed employee has. So one symptom may be that the overwhelmed employee feels consistently stressed and overwhelmed, hence the name, overwhelmed employee. They may maintain a perpetual to-do list. When I say perpetual, I'm talking that when you get 3 things checked off, 4 more new ones come on, and you feel like you're never getting that to-do list totally checked off or totally done. You're feeling always behind. I think you've all heard the phrase, the hurrier I go, the behinder I get. So if that describes you, you're probably an overwhelmed employee. Overwhelmed employees have difficulty focusing. They have so much to do, they have so many distractions that they have a hard time just settling in and focusing on the task at hand. And because of that, the overwhelmed employee will experience decreased productivity because you're distracted, you're pulling away from time, you're not at your best self, and so therefore you are not as productive as you could be. And the overwhelmed employee is probably one who works late, works through lunch, and maybe even works on weekends. So thinking back to as I was preparing for this, I was thinking back to my earlier experiences in the work world. And if you've been around a while, you might be able to relate to this. I recall in my early days of banking that, well, first of all, even mid-level managers had like an assistant. And, you know, you could delegate things to an assistant. Or your unit had an administrative person that was there to just help everybody get stuff done. Well, those days are gone. When we came in to do more with less culture and mentality in the workplace, when times got tight and budgets got cut and the economy went downhill, those positions go away. And they have this way of never coming back again, right? Because your employer says, well, look, we can get by without this person, so how could we justify hiring them again? The other thing that happened is, let's see, about in the late 80s, early 90s, they put this box on your desk. And it was a computer. And it was supposed to help you get your job done. And that worked really well for a while. But we're going to talk about some things that actually has had, or outcomes that have been negative as a result of that box on your desk, or that box in your hand now, I guess I should say. So let's look at some of the causes, because you would think with all this technology that we have today, our jobs, our lives should be easier, but it's really the opposite to that. The technology is a lot of what's weighing us down. So some of the causes of the overwhelmed employees is the always connected work environments. I feel like my cell phone is an appendage to me. That's like a part of my body, and if I don't have it with me immediately, I notice. And maybe some of you feel that way too, but we're constantly tethered to technology. And that's a problem, because if it's on the weekend and you're getting your work email on your smartphone, you're probably reading, answering emails. Michelle's nodding at me here because I email Michelle on the weekends and Michelle emails me. So, but we shouldn't be doing that, Michelle, right? So that is a problem, and that's one of the chief causes of the overwhelmed employee. The second item on this list here, I think you can all relate to. We have more information available to us today than we have ever had, and it is increasing exponentially with every passing day. We have information overload. We have emails coming in our inbox. We have advertisements on our screen when we're browsing online. We have articles, magazines, newspapers. We're being bombarded with information. It's actually too much information for any one human to take in. I subscribe to a couple magazines, for an example. They're magazines that I love. I get the HR magazine, I get the Chief Learning Officer magazine, I get the Harvard Business Review. They come in faster than I can read them in the office. So if I want to be able to read them, I actually need to take them home with me and try and read them at home. But everybody knows home's busy too. So we have too much information, and it's bombarding us from all directions, and it actually complicates our lives a great deal. The other cause is frequent interruptions. So Michelle, let me ask you, how many times a day do you think the average person checks their smartphone?
Wow. Personally, I mean, even if my phone isn't coming up with a notification, I'm still checking it. So it's got to be, man, I would have to say every minute or so. As terrible as that sounds.
Okay. Okay, that's a really good guess. So I don't know. I'm not that smart. How many minutes are in a day? So let's just say that the studies show that the average person checks their smartphone 150 times per day. Michelle's looking at hers right now, actually. Okay, so talk about interruptions. So one of the things we can do is maybe turn off our notifications when we're at the office, so we have fewer distractions and fewer interruptions. And we'll talk in the tips area, but that just popped in my head right now as we're talking about our smartphones as well. Another cause of overwhelm in the workplace is that information in organizations is not easy to access. Some of you may have intranets or employee portals where you can go to get information. A lot of times they're not easy to navigate. Michelle's laughing because ours is great, but it's not always easy to find what you're looking for. So that's a problem. And employees spend a lot of time during their day trying to access and find information they need to do their jobs. Another item is system integration failure. So we have all these great systems, right? But in a lot of organizations, I don't want to say in most, but in a lot of organizations, those systems are not integrated in any way. You go to system X to do one thing, system Y to do another, and you find yourself constantly shifting between applications throughout the day. That's a big time sucker-upper. It's a technical term, by the way. But that is a huge problem. So that's one of the things that is causing the overwhelm. In fact, you may know people that have 2 or 3 screens on their desktop because of this, so that they don't have to flip around so much. Now, Michelle will tell you, she convinced me to get a second screen on my desk, and I forget to use it. It's kind of like a paperweight. Anyway, so you probably are resonating. Hopefully that's resonating with you and you understand what I'm talking about there. Another cause of the overwhelmed employee is the increasing complexity of work. Yes, we have computers, but they're not always intuitive. Our work is more complex, it's more in depth, it's more data driven, it's more time intensive. It really is, well, for lack of a better word, complex. It really is driving some stress and overwhelm in the workplace. Hopefully the next bullet will resonate with you as well. Meeting overload. So sometime back in the 80s, there was this shift in organizational development to include employees in on things, which is awesome. Don't get me wrong, it's awesome. But sometimes there's a meeting and a committee for everything, and that may be something in the organization that might bog you down and keep you from doing your core job and your core responsibility. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in the tips area. But as an example, I know one day, probably it happens a couple times a month, I'll be in meetings the whole day. I'm invited by this person and that person and another person, and I go from meeting to meeting and have no time in between to even go to the bathroom, breathe, and or figure out all the to-do items that I have.
So Libby, just to ask you a question, are all these meetings that you're having on a certain day, are they all relative to you? Do you need to be there, or can you excuse yourself when you realize, hey, this really doesn't apply to me? I mean, is that smart to do? I mean, is that something that you practice?
You know, that is a really good question, and we're going to talk about that a little more in the tips area, but it can be sometimes that you have multiple people in the same job involved in a meeting, and it's really not necessary. It could be one person goes to that meeting and the other comes back and communicates to the other what was resolved, what was decided, or get their feedback and take it back to the next meeting. So it's really important to make sure that you are really necessary in a meeting. So I appreciate that question. That's great. Okay, and then the very last bullet I mentioned earlier, and that is companies are doing more with less. I mean, that is just the way it is today. You know, the CEO is like, cut the fat. We gotta operate lean here, and so individuals may be expected to do more in their job than they ever have in the past. So what are the effects on the organization when employees are overwhelmed? Well, they're going to kind of seem common sense here, but there's employee burnout. People are just fried, they're tired, they don't have the energy to be creative, they don't have the motivation to do extra, and they suffer decreased productivity. You may have high turnover in your organization where people are leaving because they're moving on to a job that they perceive will be less stressful. But let me just say something there. I go to a lot of chamber events, and whenever I see folks out at a chamber event, I'll say, yeah, how are you doing? And if I could tell you the number of times people say, oh, I'm so busy at work, right? I don't think anybody says, well, I'm just kicking back and relaxing. So the grass is always greener is my comment, and I can say with a pretty high degree of confidence that if you are busy at your job at company X, it's going to be the same if you move over to company Y. So we're going to look at some things you can do to kind of help you survive in those environments a little better. The next bullet is conflict. I don't know about you, but when I'm stressed, I'm certainly not high in patience. And so we may be short with coworkers, we may be negative, and those things can breed conflict in the team. So that's definitely a real human factor that happens there. And then lastly, low morale of the employees and low engagement. And so those are all the organizational effects. And there's probably more, but there are a few for you there. So with all these negative effects, what are employers or organizations doing to provide relief and reduce this problem? Because as I mentioned, I mean, it's pretty widespread. I think it's happening across a lot of organizations and a lot of industries. Well, the 2014 Workforce Trends report from Deloitte found that that 57% of employees that were surveyed in their Workforce Trends survey say that their organizations are weak at helping employees meet the challenges of demanding work environments. And in fact, only 9% felt that their employers were actually doing something about it. So, so you're probably thinking now, well, this is all well and good, but maybe you're in a position in your organization where you can't affect change for the organization. But then again, maybe there's some folks joining us today who are in a position that they can affect change in the organization. So first, we're going to take a look at what you can do if you are in a leadership role in your organization and you have an opportunity to make the lives of the people on your team a little less stressful and a little less overwhelming. So if you're in a leadership role, or you don't have to be in a leadership role necessarily, you might be seen as a leader in your organization, you have an opportunity to help team members and the organization. And these are some tips to kind of reduce some of the stress factors in the environment. So the first is streamline information and systems. Make information easy to find whenever possible, integrate systems, do away with systems that aren't needed anymore and that are obsolete, and make sure your systems are effective. The second item is a biggie. Minimize meetings and or shorten meeting times. So there often is a thought, well, we need to meet about that. Well, do you really need to meet about everything? And if so, do you really need everybody that you're inviting to the meeting in the meeting? So as a leader in the organization, whether you're a supervisor, a manager, a team lead, you have an opportunity to really evaluate that before you call a meeting on something. Avoid overuse of email. Everything doesn't have to go in an email. We talked a little bit earlier about what's in your email box, and we're going to be talking about email in just a little bit, but I often get copied on emails that really are just FYI. I get copied on reply to all emails, which drives me absolutely bananas. And I'm sure that many of you can relate to that. So I'll be sitting in a meeting one day and I'll go back to my desk and I'll have 44 new emails after an hour-long meeting. So if you think about all the time in the day that we have, we spend a lot of time dealing with email. So as a supervisor, think about it before you send a group email or an organization-wide email. And really, does everybody need to be copied in on it, and or is email the most effective vehicle for delivering that message? Also, you can encourage downtime. Encourage people to get away from their desk, enjoy their lunch. It's okay to have a little fun in the workplace as long as you're still being productive. And then discourage 24/7 communications. So Michelle, stop emailing me on the weekend, okay? And then also, as a leader, you need to lead by example. So, I was just joking about that, but in Michelle and I, if I don't want Michelle emailing on her weekends and taking time away from her family, then I need to stop emailing her. I need to show her that I can hold off to Monday to talk to her. If you're really tempted to send an email on the weekends, this is what you can do. You can compose it, save it to drafts, and first thing Monday morning when you get in, you can hit the send button. Okay, so those are the things you can do as a leader in your organization, whether it's, again, manager, supervisor, team leader, just, sometimes you're an unofficial leader. You help change the culture by your actions and people follow you. So there's some things that can help the employees in the organization feel less overwhelmed. Now let's take a look at what you can do as an individual. And we're going to talk about 10 habits for time management. And we changed tips to habits here because these really are things, if they resonate with you, if you feel that these tips will work in your workplace, you want to make them a habit. So it's not just something you do today when we get off the webinar, but it's something you do every day as a habit and as part of your routine. Now, depending on your role in your organization, I'm not a Pollyanna here. I know that some individuals may not be able to implement all of these things that we're going to discuss. So take what you can get from this, and I hope some of these will work for you. Okay, tip number one, or habit number one, let's say, start early. So arriving just 15 minutes early to prepare for your day can make a big difference. You can make your to-do list. You can mentally kind of anticipate the day and prepare for the meetings that you might have. You can prepare for customers you might be serving. And you can pull out materials, files, notes, whatever you might need for the day's agenda. Now, what if you're not a morning person? Because I know there are some that are not. I personally am at my best in the morning. By 2 or 3 o'clock, I'm ready for chocolate and a nap. But if you're not at your best in the morning, you can do the same thing by staying late the day before. We're talking 15 minutes just to get organized for the following day. It can really make a big difference, and it can help you just kind of feel mentally prepared for the challenges ahead. Because in spite of what you think, it's going to be another busy day. I would come in some days and I think, oh, I don't have any meetings today. I'm going to get so much done. And then the day happens. People start coming in and everything breaks loose. So starting early can really give you an advantage. Again, as we're going through, I just want to remind everybody, please submit questions that you might have. We'd love to hear from you. Okay, tip number 2 is prioritize. So on your screen, you see a little chart here, and this is actually popularized by Stephen Covey in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. But it's actually comes from Eisenhower's urgent, important principle. So I wish I had a pointer here where I could kind of go through. So if you'll follow with me, across the top axis, you'll see urgent, not urgent. And down the side, you'll see important, not important. And so if you take a look at quadrant 1, and a quadrant 1 is important deadlines with high urgency. So these are things that are critical to your job and that are urgent. They're time-sensitive things that you have to get done. And let me just back up just briefly because I wanted to mention this before I got into this chart. Everything that you do when you are looking at your to-do list should help you get to the end goal, which is meeting your personal goals or your organization's strategic goals. So the urgent and important items are going to be things that fall within your core job responsibilities that are critical for you to do well in your job. So for an example, if you're in the customer service area or a client service area, and a client has a problem that needs to be resolved right away, that falls into the important and urgent column in the quadrant 1. Okay, moving over to the right is the important but not urgent. So I was kind of thinking about this on the way in this morning, Michelle. Just you might think I'm nuts and I need another cup of coffee, but I'm looking at my gas tank and driving in, and I looked and I said, well, okay, I'm just above a quarter of a tank, so it is now important that I get gas, but not urgent. But most of the time, when I look down, it's urgent and important because my light's on saying low fuel. But you can kind of think of it that way. The important but not urgent items are very important to your job, very important to your functioning properly. However, they are not time sensitive, or you're not up against the deadline for that item. This is where things happen, like planning, creative thinking that can help you do your job better, help the organization. This is long-term stuff that if you don't do it well and you don't do it proactively, things that you have on your list may move into the urgent and important. So if you procrastinate and avoid this area because you think, I've got time to do that later, I can work on this project later, then you come down to a situation where it is now moved over into the other quadrant, and now you find yourself stressed. So the most important thing about this quadrant 2 is that you plan. You plan time to work on items that fall within that project, and you stick to them like it is a meeting. You stick to them like it is critical that you are attending, so to speak. Okay, and then down to the next row, quadrant 3, is urgent and not important. These are the things that happen to your day, or happen in your day, where you're like, whatever. So it could be somebody else's issue that is causing an interruption to you. I think they used to have a little note hanging up when I worked in the bank. Somebody in the collections area had it hanging on their door that said, lack of planning on your part does not constitute an emergency on mine. And so that's kind of what I think about when I think about this quadrant. These are things that are going to happen. They have to be handled quickly, but they may not be important to your core job. You can look at delegating them, or you may determine that they're just things you just have to deal with, but you want to try and keep those things to a minimum because they're pulling you away from doing the important stuff. And then lastly is quadrant 4, not urgent and not important. So you think to yourself, why on earth would I be doing something that is not urgent and not important, right? So these are the things you want to eliminate. They shouldn't even be on your to-do list, like check Facebook, for an example. So you definitely want to look at all your items on your to-do list, all your tasks that you need to do in a given period of time, and figure out what things can be eliminated, what things can be delegated, what things you need to schedule time to work on, and what things you have to handle right away and immediately. Okay, tip number 3, organize and simplify. So here are 2 pictures of somebody's office space. I promise you it's not Michelle or my office space. Now let me ask you, of these 2 pictures, which one do you all believe is most conducive to being productive in the workplace? If you say the one on the left, we're in trouble. If you say the one on the right, you're on the right track. So let me ask you this question. Which one of these pictures most closely resembles your workspace right now at this very moment? If it's the one on the left, you've got some work to do. So you probably have all heard the expression, a cluttered space equals a cluttered mind, or a cluttered desk equals a cluttered mind. And you think, well, that's an old adage. My grandmother said that. Can't be true, right? Well, actually, there is scientific evidence that proves that that is the case. So researchers at Princeton University in their Neuroscience Institute, in 2011, they published a study in the Journal of Neuroscience that directly relates productivity to uncluttered and organized living. And so this is the finding of their reports, and I'm going to read you this verbatim because it's pretty intense. Let's see. Multiple stimuli present in the visual field at the same time compete for neural representation by mutually suppressing their evoked activity through visual cortex, providing a neural correlate for the limited processing capacity of the visual system. So what the heck does that mean, right? This is what it means. A cluttered space equals a cluttered mind. So it's actually true. So one of the things you want to do is, you may have to schedule this in your day, schedule a half day, whatever it takes, get yourself organized, simplify your space. Personal effects are great, but the example on the left, I mean, I don't even know where to look. I don't know if I'm looking at Dr. Seuss or the flamingos or the, I don't know, is that the Grinch? I think that might be the Grinch. So, you know, keep those things to a minimum. Make it you, but don't make it over cluttered. Everything has a place. Create a filing system that works for you. There's all kinds of great books and articles and things that you can find online about how to best organize your workspace. So I would highly encourage you to do that. One of the methods, though, that I recommend for helping you to organize and simplify is the TRAF method, T-R-A-F, TRAF. And some of you may be familiar with this, and this is actually tip number 4. The TRAF method allows you to quickly organize and prioritize the mounds and mounds and mounds of paper that fills our offices and our files. The key with the TRAF method is to deal with an item immediately using one of these 4 dispositions. So you only touch the item once until you need it again, and you may never need it again. So when something comes across your desk, you can do one of 4 things. Number 1, toss it. You're never going to need it again. And let's just say it's a flyer from Fred Pryor inviting you to a training seminar. Toss it, because I can tell you right now, you can get better training here at Carroll Community College. You don't need that. Sorry, that was a shameless self-promotion. Number 2 is refer it to someone else. So is this something that I need, or should I give this to Michelle, or should I give this to Diane, or should I give this to Stacy? Could they use this? Or is it something that someone else on my team can do? If you are in a position where you can delegate things to others, go ahead and refer it to out of sight, out of mind. It's taken care of from there. The third thing is act on it. It's important. Something needs done, so take care of it. That will probably be things that fall into the urgent and important category. And the very last thing is file it. Put it in a file, and you may need to deal with it later. If you do need to deal with it later, then add that item to your to-do list so you don't forget to deal with it later. Because I'm kind of like out of sight, out of mind. If I don't see it, I don't remember it. But if it's on my to-do list, I know where I filed it, and I'll be able to pull it out when I'm ready to work on that item. Notice nothing on the screen says set it on your desk aside and deal with it later. Okay? The TRAF method works. Make it a habit, and I encourage everybody today to try it out and see how it works for you. Tip number 5 is to leverage technology. So I know. I was talking about how horrible technology was and how it's stressing us out, but there actually is technology that is helpful to us. So I am not against technology at all. In fact, I love technology, but use technology to the best of your ability where it can help you. There are tons of productivity apps available. In fact, PC Magazine, and you can go out and Google this, PC Magazine top productivity apps for 2017. It's an article, you can find it online easily, and you need to know that there are 60 apps that they talk about in there. And so the thing with productivity apps is everybody's job's a little bit different, so everybody, or one size is not going to fit all. So I can't sit here and tell you which app to use, which app not to use. So I would encourage you to go out and look and see what's available out there. Off the top of my head, one of the things that I know that a lot of you may have access to is a Google Drive or a OneDrive, so that you can keep all your documents in one place, so that no matter where you're working, you have access to those documents. Prior to me discovering OneDrive, I was emailing files home, emailing them back when I work with them, or taking them on a flash drive, moving in there, and then you never really know which is the most recent copy. Can get a little bit confusing, especially if you're busy and you're doing it quickly. So OneDrive is a really cool tool. The other thing that I think probably most people have on their desktop, unless you're using another email server, whoops, sorry about that, is Outlook. So I'm just going to cover a couple things with you real quick about Outlook, because it is, as I mentioned, most people use it as their email application. Not everyone. You might use Google. And there's probably very similar features in Google. But how do we manage all those emails that we're getting? So number one, Outlook tip that you can apply today is apply that TRAF method that we just talked about to every email that you receive. And I won't regurgitate that in the interest of time. The next is organize your inbox with folders. So I might have folders related to a client project or Carroll County SHRM, of which I'm a member. I might get emails from them. When you create those folders in your inbox, you can also create a rule that anytime an email comes from Carroll County SHRM or from a particular client, it automatically, when it comes into your inbox, goes into the appropriate folder. And that way your inbox is not overloaded, you're not sifting through things, everything is organized automatically. There's a shortcut that's on your ribbon. It's called the reply and delete button. That's a perfect shortcut for replying quickly to an email that you do not need to keep. So Michelle emails me and says, what do you want for lunch today? I'm running out. I say, you know, I was going to say a hot dog. We learned last month that hot dogs are not good to eat. Chick-fil-A. So I say, I'd like a Chick-fil-A salad. So instead of hitting reply through the email, if I hit reply and delete on the shortcut bar, it sends my message, and then at the same time, it automatically deletes that email from my inbox, which is an awesome shortcut. Microsoft Outlook has an awesome task feature where it allows you to add tasks to your to-do list. You can also prioritize the task. You can assign due dates to the task and reminders, and you can also delegate the task to other people. So it's really cool. And then also Outlook has another tool, which I occasionally forget to use. It's like an electronic Post-it note. It's a memo that you can put right onto your right into your Outlook, and you can go look at all your memos. You can even pick the color if you like pink, yellow, green, and you can put quick reminders and notes to yourself instead of having Post-it notes all around your office. Oops. Okay. So those are just a few tips that I wanted to share with you today to help you to be more productive with your email, with your Outlook. And that's just an example of how you can leverage technology to help you. So if you want to know more about Outlooks, we have a great class here at Carroll Community College. I would encourage you to check it out and come see us and learn a few things that can help you. Okay. Tip 6. We did a poll at the beginning, and we said that multitasking helped you to be highly productive. 76% of you said that was false. Yay for you. Very good. And 24% of you said that that was true. Well, we were told this about, I don't know, maybe four or 5 years ago. Like, multitasking was a thing that everybody was proud they could do. I can multitask. I'd put it on my not me personally, but individuals say, I put it on my resume that I multitask. Well, multitask means that you never really focus on one thing completely. And so how well do you think things are getting done? Multitasking is actually now proven not to be effective for the workplace. So one of the things you would want to do instead is what we refer to as batching work. So batching work is doing like tasks and focusing in and completing those like tasks all at the same time. For an example, 1 hour in the afternoon, I might dedicate to responding and composing emails. Another chunk of time in my day, I might say, okay, now I'm going to sit down and write all the proposals or all the reports that I need to write. When you get in the groove, you can work much more effectively. You're focused, you're purposeful, and you can get things completed much more effectively. One of the things, though, you need to also put in place so that you have a successful batching session, is to eliminate distractions. So again, you may or may not be able to do these things in your workplace. Take what you can do here and apply it as you feel fit. Clear your desk of unnecessary items related to your task. Forward your phone to voicemail or to an associate to answer for you during your time that you're focusing. Close your office door. You may even want to put a do not disturb sign on your door. Or let everyone know, you know what, I'm going to be sequestered this afternoon. I'm working on proposals. I really need to focus. Thanks. If there's something that you need that's urgent, obviously come and get me. But otherwise, let's touch base afterwards. Close your Outlook, or at a minimum, turn off the notifications. If you have the little Outlook pop-up box that comes up in the right-hand side of your screen that tells you you have a new email, turn it off. It is a distraction. If you can watch that pop up and not read it, then kudos to you. But it is one of the many distractions in our workplace, so I highly recommend that you turn that off. Silence your cell phone, as we were talking about earlier, or turn off notifications. And then close any unnecessary applications on your desktop. So if you're working on your desktop, if you've got Facebook open in the background, you might be tempted to take a break and pop over and check Facebook. Don't let that tempt you. Tip number 8, learn to say no, but do it gracefully. So again, depending on your role, you may or may not see this as an option. It's not easy for people to say no, especially if you're a go-getter, you like challenges, you like to be seen as the person that's always a team player. But there are times when you have to realize that you cannot do it all, that your core work may be suffering because you're always, I want to be on the Christmas planning committee or the summer picnic committee for the organization. There may be times where you may just have to say no. How you do it gracefully, you can say, I would love to, however, I've got these proposals that I have to get out by next week, and I'm afraid that our customers might suffer if I don't do that. Or if it's something your boss is asking you to do, you have to be real careful about that, but you should be able to have a frank discussion with your boss to say, I'm getting some increasing requests to do things, and I really like to talk these over with you because I'm thinking my core responsibilities might be suffering a little bit if I take on these additional things. And I just want to kind of get your input on that. One of the things you always want to make sure of is that when you take on something in the workplace, make sure that it aligns with your work and with your strategic goals for your organization. Make sure it has a purpose. One of the greatest mentors, bosses that I had, his name was Jerry. I worked with him in the financial services industry, and he had this thing that he did, and it was awesome. I was in human resources, and somebody came, people come to you with requests and things all the time. And he used to have this habit of saying, okay, how does this align with our strategic priorities? And we sat there and we mulled over it together. And if it didn't, we said, you know what, we're not going to take on this project, or we're not going to participate in this project. So always make sure that what you're saying yes to makes sense and that you have time for it. And if not, find a way to say no. Okay, tip number 9. Reach out and touch someone. Now, if you're as old as I am, you remember that from the Bell Atlantic commercials. Not Verizon, Bell Atlantic. And so I'm sure that you've all had this situation where you're emailing people and you realize after 25 minutes of bantering back and forth by email that it was probably a heck of a lot easier to pick up the phone and call them. So I would highly recommend that for more complex issues that are delicate and must be handled well so that there's not misunderstandings, that you actually pick up that thing that's on your desk. Mine's still connected by cord, and you call the other person. You can sometimes resolve in less than 5 minutes something that would have wasted 25 or 30 minutes on emails. And sometimes those exchanges can go on for days. And then you're finally like, I'm going to pick up the phone. And then you think, well, why didn't I do that in the first place? So make it a first option where appropriate, not a last option. And if you're in the same building, go see the person. It gets you away from your desk, gets you a little exercise, and adds that personal touch. Okay, and the last tip for us is keep meetings on track. So I mentioned earlier that meetings are one of the things that's overwhelming us in the workplace. And some meetings, there's not going to be anything that you can do about them. They're inevitable, they're going to happen. But what you can do is help. If you're not the meeting organizer, you can help the meeting organizer by making sure things stay on track. So number 1, a meeting should last no more than 90 minutes. That's important. Anything over 90 minutes has been proven to be unproductive. Make sure every meeting that you attend has an agenda and that you see the agenda in advance. So if you get invited to a meeting, email the organizer and say, hey, could I see the agenda for this? And another subtle way to do that is if you suggest something for the agenda and they say, well, I don't have one. And you say, well, perhaps we should make one. Would you like me to help? Confirm that your presence is required. Michelle asked about this earlier. Sometimes people over-invite for fear of offending someone or cutting someone out of the loop. When you look at the agenda, if you see that it's not applicable to you, then talk to the meeting organizer about that. Help to keep meetings on track. It's real easy to get sidetracked onto, what you did this weekend or what you're doing this weekend or what you did last weekend, but try and bring the group back on track. And then schedule time in between meetings to make sure you have time to update your priorities and to-do list, go to the restroom, grab something to eat. Don't let yourself get hangry, hungry, angry. That's not a very productive mode to work in. Now, so that's tip number 10, but I have a bonus for you. I'm going to do this very quickly because we're almost out of time. Bonus tip. When we're talking about priorities, when we're talking about scheduling your time, schedule time for you. Overwhelmed employees lack time in their day for their most important asset, and that is themselves. We're too busy taking care of everybody else or everything else, and we need to take time for ourselves. Don't feel guilty about it. It's important. How good can you be in the workplace if you're burnt out? So take time, schedule it into your calendar every day. Lunchtime, maybe your time to eat, or you may go outside, take a walk, sit under a tree, but find time to relax, reflect, and recharge. Now, I'm very impressed. 65% of the people, actually, I'm not very impressed. I'm sorry. I'm very, I don't know what I am. Surprised. Thank you, Michelle. I'm very surprised to find that 65% of the people that answered the poll in the beginning said that they actually only get away from their desk 1 to 2 times per week for lunch. So I'm going to ask you to do it today and schedule time for you and try and change that 1 to 2. And we didn't give 0 as an option, but I bet you there's some zeros out there. Schedule time for you to do these things so that you can be your best self. Okay, and that's it for the tips. So Michelle, do we have any questions?
We do. Wow, thanks. That was a lot of great information. I know I was jotting some notes down while you were talking as well, so there's lots of things I can bring back for myself. But we do have a two-part question related to Outlook. So the first part is, how do I turn off the email notifications like you mentioned? And how, with the rule in place that you mentioned, how do you know or remember to check the folders that the emails are going into?
All right, those are both really good questions. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to send you the procedures out to everybody that's on the webinar to do those two things. Off the top of my head, I can't remember how you turn that notification off, but we'll send you the procedures. The second item is, how do you know to look in the folders? So when you're looking at your inbox on your left-hand pane in Outlook, or if I have mine organized that my folders pane is on the side, you will see a bolded word. So like if it's client appointments, for an example, it will be bold, indicating there's a new email in there. So you can get a quick visual, and then when you do your batching, you can go into those folders during the allotted time and look at those emails. Hope that helps.
Great, thanks. I actually had a quick question too. So I know a lot of us we have good intentions, we get busy, but then we get overwhelmed again and we fall into those bad habits that you mentioned. So what are some ways to get us back on track quickly if we've sort of fallen off the wagon, so to speak?
Discipline. Did that come from Karate Kid? Discipline, grasshopper, or whatever, right? It is very easy to do. And so what I kind of mentioned earlier is that you can't just do this temporarily. You really have to make it a habit. And it takes time to do it and fail, probably, to make it a habit. But it's got to be important to you, number one. And it's a change in the way you work, which change is never easy. So I think I could get this wrong, but it's something like you need to do something 9 times before it becomes a habit. So keep at it. Be persistent. If you have to put I said don't put Post-it notes on your computers, but if you have to put a Post-it note reminding yourself to use the TRAF method today, then do that. Do whatever visual clues to remind you, because the truth is, when you get into work and you get involved, it's easy to fall back into old habits. So you really just have to be disciplined, and you have to pick the things that really work for you. And by the way, you may find some things we talked about today, you try them and it's not working for me. That's okay. But you might find something you can modify to make something work for you. So as you're trying it, decide what things you really like. You're going to make habits into your workplace, and just stick at it.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, I guess I'll be breaking out those Post-it notes to put on my computer for some reminders here. So I think that's it with the questions. If we have any other questions that we weren't able to get to, please know we'll get to those via email after the PowerBrew. This PowerBrew is also being recorded, so it will be available on our PowerBrew website as well. So you can always go back and you could share those out with some friends who weren't able to make it. You'll get an email as well with the link to the recording. So next month we have a fan favorite. We have Mike Mannion back to talk to us about brain craves. That'll be on Tuesday, August 15th. Again, they're always at 9 a.m. So stay tuned for that. Well, sure sounds interesting. So thanks again, Libby. Great information. Hopefully everybody's able to put this in place after the webinar today.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.